Welcome to Entanglement Radio, transcendent talk for the conscious mind. Join us for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science, new thought, and conscious healing. Explore the potential and infinite possibilities of what it means to be human with some of the best guests in radio. At Entanglement Radio, it is all connected. Now, here is your host, Angela Levesque, on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Welcome and good day. You're listening to Entanglement Radio right here with Angela Levesque on OMTimes Radio. I'm coming to you live today from the beautiful foothills of the Rocky Mountains here in Boise, Idaho. I've got to say, I'm pretty excited about my guest today. We have Stacey Couch on. And we are talking about nature's messengers, and we are going to talk about how we can listen to those messages put out by all those beautiful animals out there and just connect with that spirit and how we connect with our spirit animals. It's going to be a very good show. Next week, we have Richard Gordon on, and he is the founder of Quantum Touch. And if you are just new listening to this show, I welcome you. And I just want to let you know we have so many great guests lined up in the next couple of months. We have Simran Singh. We have Dr. Susan Chomsky. We have Dr. Carl Grill. We have a NASA scientist coming on next month. We just have so many great shows lined up. So I know that many of you have been joining me on Twitter and on Facebook. So I thank you for that. That is amazing. So if you are out there and you are not connected, I would love to have you check out my website at hestiahealth.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Hestia Health and at Entanglement Radio. And if you'd like to join my newsletter, you can do that on my website. And that way you can learn about upcoming shows and events that I'm participating in, as well as I always add little tidbits that I find out there that I think will help my my visitors and my listeners of this show. So please do that. And as I mentioned today, we are talking about nature's messengers. And I had an experience this summer where I was driving down a very windy road that had almost no shoulder, and right out of the periphery, and I had a brief second, and I hit a fawn, a little like Bambi, white spots. And I was devastated. I pulled over and I was crying hysterically, and I had a really hard time just getting myself together. And then for the next few days, I just was in just depression. I just felt so horrible. And I knew that there was nothing that I could do. Literally, I had like a millisecond, between the time I saw the fawn and the time that I hit it. But I was just completely devastated. And I just had visions of the mom and just, wondering where her young was. And as that week progressed, I was sitting, actually the first time I connected with that fawn, I was doing some yoga, and I was in downward facing dog, and I was looking between my legs, and I saw the fawn in the window, and I thought, oh my goodness. And so I decided to connect with her in meditation. And I realized, at first I was thinking that her presence there was kind of like a how dare you, you took my life. And what I really realized as I connected with her spirit and her energy is that she was teaching me about self-love and just loving myself and forgiving myself for perceived mistakes and just really embracing who I am. And it was an incredible experience. And so although I still felt a sense of loss and sorrow, having that connection, it opened my eyes to a lot of things and just helped me remember that I do need to continually work on self-love. So that was a really interesting message. And we're going to talk about more messages like that, some that my guest experienced firsthand, and then some that she has continued to learn about through her shamanic training. As well as we're going to talk about some, as I was reading this book, and I was telling Stacey this before the show, that there was just this, I just connected to so many deeper issues just beyond being able to connect with your spirit animal. Ideas of conservation and man's drive to dominate our natural world. And so we're going to start with that conversation. So if you're listening in, hoping to learn more about animal guides, we will definitely be getting to that in the second half of the program. But I think there's some other really deep spiritual conversations that we can have before we get there. So with that, let me introduce my guest. Stacey Couch describes herself as a shamanic cowgirl who works as a publicist and journalist for Mother Nature. A pioneer at heart, she empowers people with the ability to explore life's big questions. She aims to show how to form a real connection with our own souls through the natural world. A lifelong student of nature, she has a biology degree in ecology and conservation, as well as a 2-year shamanic certification. Her home on a 38-acre ranch is in Colorado, and she offers shamanic healing and teaching services. So with that, I feel honored and blessed to welcome Stacey Couch to the program. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Angela. I love that story that you shared.
Well, and I think that there are just so many messages. And so messages and messengers in the natural world. And so, like I said, as I was reading your book, there were so many times I was just choked up, not only just hearing about your experience, but the revelations that you took out of having those interactions with those various animals. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I want to start with you telling us about how you came to live on an island, because that in itself is like a Thoreau, Walden Pond kind of experience that I thought was, you could just take so many lessons from that in itself. So let's start with that.
Well, I really wasn't endeavoring to spend 8 days at a time on a windswept, desolate island by myself. That was really not the direction I was trying to go. What I was looking for was to be able to help an endangered species hands-on. And so I got an opportunity to take care of a group of endangered foxes that were in pens in a captive breeding program. There were about a dozen individuals left in the world. And this was my job, was to take care of them, feed them, clean up after them, bring them water. They were at remote pens, so I actually had to hike out all of their food and water to them. And it sounded really glamorous to me when I read the job description and applied for the job. And it was a very tough hiring process, so I felt very fortunate when I was selected, and threw caution to the wind, just went to do this because this is what I wanted to do. And I ended up having an absolutely different experience than I expected because of all of that time that I had alone.
And that even reading that, I was like, wow, so few people in this world right now, especially in the Western world, get to have that experience of completely unplugged, fully immersed in the natural world. What were some of the things that came up for you during that time of soul searching?
Well, definitely a depression early on, and then some bouts of what I would say madness, and just talking to myself and being frustrated at the world or at the wind or at the loneliness. And then came in the dreams. I've always been a really, really vivid dreamer, but at that time I started to have dreams that were reflected in my daytime. So I would dream about my babysitter. That was like a grandmother to me when I was a child. She had passed away long before. She was coming to me in my dreams. And then the next day I would end up seeing an owl in broad daylight. And I made the connection between that owl and remembering that she had her whole house decorated with owls. So I started to have both visions in my dreams and then real world encounters with different, mostly raptors, so hawks and owls on the island, that really coincided with what was going on in my inner world. And that started to draw me in. And then I started to find silence as well, which is healing in and of itself.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media. one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
All right, we are back, and you are listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on IOM.FM. My guest today is Stacey Couch, and we are talking about the messengers of nature. Stacey, I want to bring up what we were talking about before the break, because I think it's a really interesting point. And you were talking about going in and working with these foxes, and there was rules that you had to follow. And I'd asked you about the conflict between what was expected of you as a scientist and, what your intuition was telling you. Do you feel that your interaction with these foxes and having those rules, do you think that served your relationship with them?
I think it actually served my relationship with nature, because I follow rules, and there was no one there to enforce them. There was no one there to see that I wasn't sitting in the pens and hanging out with the foxes all day. But that's part of my nature is to do, what I commit to. So what really, it ended up forcing me to have all of this free time, because it only took about 4 or 5 hours a day total to take care of these foxes. So I had all this free time on my hands, and it actually, because it was so apparent that I couldn't spend the time with the foxes and the need in me was so strong, it actually caused me to reach out to the wild animals that were there. And it was the first time in my life that I had the opportunity to really felt like I was being seen by the animals and that I was part of their world, and to let go of the illusion that I wasn't. And that's the rational mind. That's the scientific mind saying, well, we're just an observer. We're watching outside of nature what's going on. And I had the chance to get to drop that and really have relationships with individuals that lived in the wild around my cabin where I lived.
I want to talk about some of those lessons, but as you're saying that, you were talking about us being observers, and as I'm listening to that kind of mentality that we have, that to me just leads to our idea that we can dominate the natural world. And I think that clearly that is leading to a whole host of ecological issues that we're facing right now. Do you think, from a conservation standpoint, how do you think that we should shift our perception of our relationship with the natural world and all the animals in it?
I think the biggest piece is what I was talking about before in terms of dropping that illusion that we're separate from nature. We are absolutely a part of the natural world. And to think any differently is where we start to get into trouble automatically. And I think the other piece is that we have taken our spirituality and put it in buildings, in temples, and also taken it very much inside or in community. And we don't relate our spiritual life anymore to the natural world. And that used to be so intertwined. There was no difference between the two. And I think that's another very important part for conservation. Once, like that story that you shared about the fawn, once we're able to feel compassion and know the soul in the creatures and the plants and the land around us, it opens us up in a way that nothing else can. And it's a big part of a spiritual practice, of a healthy spiritual practice, I think.
And yes, I just love that because, we're going to, in a few minutes, talk about how we connect with our own spirit animals. But that is, I think what you were just saying, that is the deeper wisdom in that is that once we learn to listen and we pick up on the messages from these beautiful messengers that are around us, not only just in animals and plants and whatever, that opens up a whole different way of approaching the status quo, the way that we currently deal with all of our infrastructure, technology, all of those things. It all plays into that. I want to ask you though, what were some of the lessons that you learned specifically from some of your time with those wild animals?
I think at the time it was really hard for me to put anything into words. I knew something was happening around me, and I knew there was some sort of veil being lifted or door opening that was into an unfamiliar land for me. And that was a big part of it, was sitting with that question of what does all this mean? What is happening? And it was that questioning that was born in me during that time that changed the course of my life and brought me into a very rich spiritual life and very rich connection with the divine and with the natural world. So there were times where I definitely got affirmations. There was a red-tailed hawk that came out of nowhere from behind me and flew right over my head one morning and called right when he got over my head and scared the daylights out of me, made me jump and all the hair on my neck stand up. And I found out later that day that my uncle had passed away at about the time that hawk flew over my head. And he was very fond of red-tailed hawks. And so that's those kind of things, the affirmations that there is a connection between what's going on in the natural world and my experiences with animals and what's going on in my life as it is and then my inner world. All of that was interconnected. That was one thing that I did start to understand when I was living on the island.
There was one thing from your book that one line, there was actually so many, like I said, the wisdom that you took from your interactions with these animals was amazing. But you say somewhere in your book that this isn't an exact quote, but something about embracing the island. So you could either live in the wild or you could live and love in the human world. And I thought, is that our journey to be able to find a comfortable place for both? Because I thought, at that time when you're saying, either I can be in the wild or I can learn to live and love as a human in the human world, it seemed like it was an either or proposition. Do you still think that?
At the time it was an either or proposition for me because I was a wildlife biologist and I was traveling for work. So every 6 months I would be on a new job, and then I got this job on the island. So it was a week on, a week off. And so there was like this, I was either out doing research or I was home with family and friends. And so I was living the polarity there. And now I integrated that more. And that was really my goal at the time, was to be able to go back into the human world and try to find a way to have both. And so I worked a bunch of different jobs after that, trying that. I worked at a wildlife rehabilitation center, and a organic farm, which I share both about in the book. And I've since worked for a horse rescue and a shamanic art school. So there's all of those were ways of how can I integrate my life where I'm interacting with people and at the same time I'm encompassing this connection with the natural world.
Let's talk for a moment about your work at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. And again, the birds were another, they came back to you. And it was interesting, your work with a specific hawk called Thalia. And what was interesting to me as I was reading it is it seemed like your struggle and her struggles seemed to converge, and that you could see yourself and what you were going through in her struggles. And is that a common way that we experience this connection with animals?
Yeah, I really think it is. And I think I was just fortunate to have the opportunity to have that kinship with a hawk, but I think a lot of people really have those experiences with their pets to varying levels, where they work through certain wounds or certain struggles in their life with the help of a pet, or the pet is also working through something similar. Often people who have experiences or trouble with fear and moving forward in their life will have a fearful animal, and their path of helping their fearful animal become more confident in the world is also the story of their own coming into confidence and self-esteem.
So do you think they come here, their little souls, like offer to come here to be our teachers?
I think that there's a both and to that story. My mom always taught me when I was growing up that, and I think it's a sweet image, and so I still believe in it to this day, just because of I like it, that there is, before we come here, we meet with our angels or guides, and we sit down and map out, okay, who am I going to meet up with this lifetime? And she always posed it in that way of like, well, who's going to be my mother and father, and who will be my friends, who will I meet at certain points along my path. And she always talked about it as people. But I believe that also that happens with our pets, and that we are also have made a decision to meet up with them at a certain time. I have a very large, a 1,200-pound Mustang who experienced a lot of abuse when she was younger and was extremely afraid of people when I met her. And so I really do feel like part of my work was to come here and meet her and have time with her to help her become more confident. So I feel like I'm here to serve her in a lot of ways, because I don't ride her. She just stands out in the pasture now and eats hay. And so I really do feel like I'm in service to her as well. So I feel like it's a two-way street. It goes both ways.
And that seems like a lesson that you learned as well, working with the hawks, and how they were wanting, working with birds of prey, and they were wanting you to kind of train them so you could take them out and, show them to kids. And you struggled with that quite a bit, having that relationship where you were trying to kind of, okay, this is what we're doing, and imposing yourself and your will on the birds.
Yeah. I mean, it was very much that I had that they had a job, that the birds, they were ambassador birds, and part of their justification for being in captivity, they were handicapped, so they couldn't be released. But the reason why they were the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was allowed to keep them in captivity was because they went and did these education programs, and they had to do so many a year. So again, here we come in with some of the rules, right? And I really, that was a big struggle for me, especially but even I think that was just a small piece of that. What you're talking earlier about, that dominion over nature, of taking this completely wild animal that is not comfortable living in captivity and helping them become comfortable in these very foreign situations for them. But it was also part of my own process. I wasn't comfortable speaking in front of groups of people. I was worried in relationships with animals, how other people perceived my ability to train them or handle them or care for them. So therein lies how we were helping each other. I was helping the birds become more comfortable with the job that they had to do, and they were helping me integrate more into the human world.
I love that. And I like that you mentioned that with pets as well, because I feel I had a dog named Gaia, and she was my baby before my baby. And I just felt like I had just the deepest soul level connection with her. And we played and did all sorts of, we took a lot of journeys together. And so I love that you said that. Well, when we get back, we're going to kind of shift gears and talk more about connecting with our spirit animals and how we can do that and why we should. So we will do that more here with Stacey Couch. She's the author of Gracious Wild, A Shamanic Journey with Hawks. We will be right back after this break.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Hi, my name is Monica, and I'm the host of Co-Creating Now. Give yourself an opportunity to connect with your all-knowing higher self and manifest joy, love, and peace together every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern.
Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
What if living didn't have to be so serious?
What if you could move beyond your problems with greater confidence and ease than you've ever imagined?
Throw your labels out the window and join the Irreverent Therapist for practical tips and a very different way of approaching the changes you would like to create.
Marilyn Bradford
and Pam Hodling
have empowered hundreds of people to come out of self-judgment, quit looking to experts, and begin to create the lives they desire.
Join us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Irreverent Therapist Show.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Well, welcome back. You're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on IOM.FM. I have Stacey Couch on my program today, and we are talking about the subject of her book, Gracious Wild, A Shamanic Journey with Hawks. So if you've been listening in, waiting for us to talk about how we can connect with our spirit animals, you don't have to wait any further. So let's start really basic. When we're talking about a spirit animal, what exactly do you mean by that?
Very simply, I mean a guardian angel in animal form. I mean an animal that is the spirit of an animal that is beyond the veil, so that is not incarnate in this world right now. So it could be a pet that you had that has passed, but it also could very well be, and most often is, a wild animal.
So, yes, because as you know, I was telling you about my dog before the break. I believe she's still around me all the time. I've described her as my soulmate before, and people laugh at me, but she just, I've had many pets since that I have adored immensely, but we didn't have that same connection. So when, you mentioned before about a power animal. Is that the same thing as a spirit animal?
Yeah, good catch. I do use the terms interchangeably. Some people also know the word totem animal, and that is one and the same as well. People will put them along a spectrum, but really I think they're all pretty interchangeable.
One of the things, that was a theme in your book, as I mentioned before, was birds. That very often hawks, but there was owls and do you find that is there like one designated type of species that's okay, this is your species of spirit animal, or do they come and go as needed in your life?
Well, that is one of the old myths, and I don't know, I should find out where that came from, that we have just one spirit animal throughout our entire life. That is, in my mind, very much a myth, because from my experience, of my own, I have a whole tribe of different spirit animals, from birds to sea mammals to turtles to all sorts of different animals. And when I do shamanic healing work for clients, I find the same is true for them, that they have many spirit animals that come for them during the work that I do and that they relate with. And some do stick with us for our entire life. And there are others that come in and help for a certain period of time. I feel like the hawks were really strong, obviously, during the time period that I cover in the book. And they're still around around, but less prevalent at this point in my life. And there's other animals, spirit animals too, that help us with specific issues. Like I have a white egret, it's like a type of heron that helps me when I'm in big crowds and helps me kind of mitigate my energy so that I'm not in too many places at once.
So is there, a wolf means one thing, a seal means another thing. Are they kind of clear-cut messages, or does it really depend on your situation and how they show up and what the circumstances is that surrounds their appearance?
This is something that I've spent a lot of time talking or thinking about and writing about and contemplating myself. And that I feel like it is good to have short kind of keynotes for each animal so that if someone sees an animal, they can get an answer very quickly about what that animal means. And then they can kind of keep that in their memory so that when they see the animal again, they can remember back to that one word. Like dolphin would relate to breath, or deer relates to gentleness, or wolf relates to being a witness or your own teacher or guru. So there's nice keynotes like that I kind of have on cue for a lot of animals in my head based on a lot of the spirit animal books I've studied and also studying the animals myself. But there's so much more. And I think that if we stop short at that keynote, at that one paragraph we find online somewhere, that we're really selling the experience short because it's multi-layered. There's so many layers to it. We can look at, what were we thinking at the time we saw the animal? What are we going through and are struggling with in our life right now that the animal can help with? What are we endeavoring to create that they can help with? Those things really play in. So we can start to look at their biology, their mating, what they eat, where they live. All of those things can become a metaphor and an answer and guidance. And we can also look at mythology around the animal. And then we can also tap into our own experience with that one particular animal and what that meant for us. So there's so many layers. We could spend a whole lifetime really working with one animal, and because there's so many layers involved in the experiences with them.
So how do you know if you've had an experience with a spirit animal it's just a sighting?
There are so many different ways to go on that. And I think a lot of it is learning how to trust your intuition and coming more into acting on or believing your intuitive hits. So there can be a power animal or spirit animal can show up in somebody's dream. They can just have, sometimes I meet people that they just simply have had a really strong attraction to, say, Black Panthers their entire life, and they don't know where it comes from. They just have it. And that's their soul speaking to them and telling them that spirit animal is one of theirs, that's their spirit animal. So I don't think that there needs to be a specific ceremony or any sort of specific procedure followed in discovering what your spirit animal is.
Because I know for myself, going back to my deer story that I told at the beginning, I have always been very connected with deer. I love them. I know, here where I live, across the river, there's this big field, and every night the deer come and they eat in the field. And it just brings me just this intense sense of calm and peace. And it's interesting when I asked you, about, does a wolf mean this? Does a deer mean that? And you said a deer means gentleness. And as I'm listening to that story, because clearly there was a larger message of self-love, but as I'm listening to that, the thing that came to my head is reminding myself to be gentle with myself. Mm-hmm. And that is an important part of self-love, obviously. So, I think it's just so beautiful. And one thing that you talk about, you were talking about the hawk, and it was holding the mouse in its talons, and you said it was interesting to you how they related to the spirit of her prey at the time of kill. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it's so interesting because so often we are just staring out, and I see a lot of birds flying out around outside of my windows all the time, and you just think they're just doing what they're doing because of some innate program that nature gave them, and you don't appreciate the the entirety of the spirit, and that it's not just an outplay of physiology. And I was thinking, if we had the same amount of reverence for the food that we eat, where would we be now? What are your thoughts on that?
I love that. I so love that. And that was a very profound moment for me when I saw, because occasionally I had the opportunity to feed the hawks that I worked with, to feed them live prey. And I gave her a mouse one day and watched her with it and tuned in the unseen realm and listened to what was going on. And I saw her have this relationship with, she took the, mouse in her talons and took the mouse's life by gripping it with her talons. But then she stood there with it for a time. And I saw in my mind's eye that she took the spirit of that mouse over to the other side. And yeah, we do. We think of them as these little survival machines, that they're just, that the world's kind of cruel. Nature's kind of cruel. And those nature shows don't help with that very much either, right?
Yes.
Where it's just kind of brutal and cruel. And it's really not. I mean, think about that. The hawk, Talia, she understood that mouse was giving its life for her, that she was going to live another day because of that mouse's sacrifice. They are so in touch with that reality, there's no false sense of security like we have, where our food comes and we just have it around us all the time. And we don't, at least those of us that are fortunate, we don't have to worry about where our next meal is coming from. And when we do worry about where our next meal is coming from, it's dissociated from the natural world, because we're worried about the money and getting to the grocery store. So there's so much value in coming into connection with our food and praying over our food before we eat it, knowing where it comes from. I think organic is an amazing thing. All this awareness about GMO foods is outstanding. I'm very excited about how much traction both are getting. And at the same time, I think that we still can get even more refined and really learn where that exact meal is coming from. What animal gave their life? Where did they live? Who raised them? All of that plays in and helps us be more conscious. And for people who have that trouble with the whole dominion over nature thing, this is one way. It's like a salve on the soul. It's really, really soothing to start to come into connection with our food in that way. And I'm very passionate about that, as you can tell. It's one of my individual spiritual practices. I'm very conscious about what I eat.
I am as well. And, even as you're saying that, I'm getting a little choked up, because if I think about if I was to tune into the animals that are held in CAFOs, and I just think, I don't know that I could bear that level of, I don't know. How do we deal with that?
Yeah. That's the struggle. And that's where I became an activist. I mean, really, that's what I was doing by devoting my whole life to going and doing research and writing papers and trying to raise awareness. And then when I went from that to doing education and going out and teaching people about wildlife and the plight of animals. So I'm very much trying to help raise awareness so that the animals are treated better. But it's still just a drop in the bucket, right? It's when I realized that on an energetic level, on a soul level, that coming into touch with the sacredness of all life, that is where you can start to feed into the whole network of the sacred and of all of these souls in the world that are suffering, and to be able to take care of myself and take care of my immediate family of animals and loved ones, and then be able to be a channel for love and light in the world. It sounds, for people who might not have a deep spiritual practice, it might sound kind of, well, that sounds easy, but it actually is a deep, deep, deep practice.
Well, when we get back, we have this segment called Bite-Sized Brilliance, and we're going to talk specifically on what we can do in our daily lives right now to connect with our spirit animals. So we'll do that more here with Stacey Couch on Entanglement Radio with Angela LeBeck. We'll be right back.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Host your show on OMFM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on OMFM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
All right, we are back, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on IOM.FM. We are in the last segment here I like to call Bite-Sized Brilliance. It's brought to you by Hestia Health, specializing in mind-body awareness, weight loss, intuitive lifestyle consulting, and energy healing. You can go to HestiaHealth.com, where we create calm minds, open hearts, and inspired lives. So while you were doing having all of these amazing experiences, living on the island and then working at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, at the same time you were working with a shaman, and you were going through shamanic journeys. And is that something that we need to do in order to connect with our own spirit animals?
No, not at all. It's a great, fantastic, fabulous tool to use to do that, but it's not at all a requirement. There's so many ways we can connect with our spirit animals. One of them is just acknowledging their presence in our lives. I know a lot of people that are really able to imagine, and we think of imagination as a thing left in our childhood, but it's actually a holy power. It's a sacred power and a sacred gift that we have. And I know a lot of people that just simply imagine their power animal with them. Like that story you were telling, I keep going back to that because it's such a great example of being in yoga and seeing that fawn all of a sudden. That was your imagination at work, and what a gift. What a gift. And so, yeah, you don't need that. And to be able to a lot of people will automatically, without even thinking, put images of their spirit animals around their house. They'll get a bedspread with dragonflies on it, or buy a necklace with a horse pendant on it, or have pictures of bears up in their house. So that's another way that you can connect in with your spirit animal. And then another way is as you see them come into your life and have an impact on your dreams, or have an impact in the decisions that you make and how you go about your day. To make note of that, I'm a big proponent of journaling. I know it's not a thing that everybody does, but if you do, I definitely encourage you to write about your spirit animal, or even to your spirit animal directly. Or if you do artwork, doing art about them, or music, writing a piece of music in their favor.
So this is just a question. Do you think that, because many of us have pets that we feel very connected with, is that a good kind of foray into connecting with the energetic spirits of just because we have already a built-in rapport? Do you find that people are, it's easy for them to connect and speak with their pets on that kind of energetic level?
I think spirit animals and pets are actually two different things. And spirit animals, the one where they can be the same is once our pets have passed away and they're on the other side and they're in spirit form. So that's the key thing that we're working with here is spirit. Spirit is of the non-material, non-ordinary world. And pets are here in the flesh. We can have pets with us that are great guides and counselors and coaches, just like our friends are. I have a cat that works with me in my shamanic work, and she's a great coworker, really, and she's gifted in the shamanic way and shows up in my shamanic journeys. And at the same time, I know she's got her whole life she's doing. She cares about when dinner's ready, and she's really adamant that it should be fed this moment, and she cares about what her sister's up to and where she's sleeping. They have a whole agenda, and they're also attached to this world. When we're working in the spirit realms and we're looking for spiritual guidance, we're really looking from a non-polarized viewpoint. We want we want to work with a guide from the spiritual realms that doesn't have an agenda, that is really looking to serve our soul's purpose. And then also is coming from a wiser, wider viewpoint.
I'm glad you made that distinction because I don't think I really appreciated that. So that's good. I want to ask, if people are using journaling and acknowledgement and connecting, how do you suggest, because they're going to want to go look up and see kind of those quick cues as to what a wolf means and what a seal represents. So do you have, because the internet is a wide and vast place.
Yes, it is.
Do you have a way to kind of help people find better resources?
Yeah, there is definitely different levels and perspectives, and I have a huge library that I'm constantly contributing to on my own website on wildgratitude.com, where I have over almost 24 now different power animals or spirit animal interpretations that I talk about, and they're quite long because I can't stop. I get so excited. I end up spending quite a bit. But it's broken into chunks, so you can kind of pull out what speaks to you. So definitely, I recommend my website, and I've got a free ebook available on my website too about what is my spirit animal is the name of the ebook. It helps you discover what your spirit animal is, dispel some of the myths. We've talked about a few today, and then also gives a ton of different resources. There's really a couple great books out there that a lot of people are really familiar with, and they're my tried and true that I go back to over and over again, just as a starting point for me where I'm at right now, but at least it gets me going, is Animals Speak by Ted Andrews. I'm sure many people know that book. And then also Medicine Cards by Jamie Sams and David Carson. Those are kind of my first go-to guides, and then I build from there.
And that's an important point too, is to take it and then connect with what your intuition says about it to get a fuller idea. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of direct revelation. So I think it's really important. I mean, if you don't know where to start, to find good, solid starting places. But if you read something that doesn't resonate with you, don't try to put it on. Just let it float away and take in what you do connect with. And that will start to help you too to hone your intuition and what is in resonance and what's not.
As we, one of my favorite, it's springtime here in Boise and everything's in bloom. And so there's a lot of beautiful birds around. Is there, like I said, because I think that this is a thing for me that I don't quite understand. So when you see all these beautiful beings in the natural world, like I said, just on the field, I'll see coyotes and deer and foxes sometimes. And is there a spirit coming from, beyond the veil that then goes and embodies that physical animal to connect with us? Is that a good way to look at it?
That's one way to look at it. I'm actually too, I probably confuse people a lot of times because I'm very fond of multiple ways of interpreting things. There's so many different levels at which we can see things. And I think that does happen. Is it what happens all the time? I'm not sure. I think that some of it too is just divinely oriented. So you think about how you met your best friend, or how you met your husband, or, those are chance encounters where two paths crossed, but obviously it was of divine order because it's a meeting with a person that changed your life. And I feel like the encounters with the animals are often the same way, that their counterpart, so the wolf spirit animal, is working on the other side or beyond the veil to coordinate a specific crossing of paths, that be it that the wolf just comes into your heart really strongly, and that is what at that time you need to explore, or that you actually have the great benefit of encountering one or seeing one in the wild.
I love that. I just, as we talked about earlier, I think there's just a deeper conversation about connecting with these animals. And I am so glad that you were able to come and clear some things up for myself as well, because I didn't know tons about it other than, some of the stuff that I've learned about through meditation and just working with energy. But we have a few minutes left here, so I want to give you the opportunity to share with my listeners how they can find your book and social media and anything else you'd like to leave them with today.
Okay. Yeah, so the name of my book, again, is Gracious Wild, A Shamanic Journey with Hawks. And that's available on Amazon or any of your local booksellers. If they don't have it on the shelves, they can order it for you. And my website is wildgratitude.com. And if you go to the blog, there is where you'll find all of the different spirit animal interpretations that I was talking about. There's also a place to go and sign up to download that free ebook on what is my spirit animal. And also you can contact me directly via email or phone, and all that contact information is on wildgratitude.com.
Yes, I will be signing up for your free ebook after this program because, I really, really connected deeply with your book. And I would suggest out there for any listeners who, are environmentally minded and really connect with the natural world, you will love, love, love this book. So I highly recommend it.
And I also wanted to, sorry to interrupt. I forgot to mention that I do work with people long distance by phone. So no matter where you are, we can connect and do shamanic work together.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Technology is one of the best things in my life and also can be the bane of my existence.
Yeah, I agree.
But I love it. Anyway, I just want to thank you so much for being on the program today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I did too. Great questions. And thank you so much for having me and raising awareness about the natural world and what it has to offer us.
This show is a really good reminder for me about why I do this show, is to be able to talk to people like you and get some bigger messages out, as well as help people on their own spiritual journeys. So thank you again.
Yes.
So coming up next week, we have the founder of Quantum Touch, Richard Gordon. And as I said at the beginning of my program, we have just a great lineup of guests coming up. We have Simran Singh at the end of the month. We have Carl Greer. We have NASA scientist David Gagin. We have the wonderful Sarah Nash. She is the host of Namaste Radio. And if you haven't listened to that yet, you absolutely should. Dr. Susan Shumsky, just so many great people coming up. So you can find my radio show every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern right here on iom.fm. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Hestia Health, as well as Entanglement Radio. And if you want to learn more about upcoming events, upcoming guests, you can sign up for my newsletter on hestiahealth.com. So I will be back next week with another live show. This is Angela Levesque wishing you love and light. I will see you next week.
A conscious lifestyle